Hi guys, welcome to my channel. This is my first video, so thank you so much for being here. Today I'm going to be talking about the 23 books that I read in February, and boy did we have a wild fucking month. I started off the month literally rating 7 books in a row, 1 to 2 stars. But I'm so glad that I stuck through because I found so many 5 stars. I'm gonna be going in order from my least favorite to my most favorite. Starting off with Play Along. This is a romance book, and I started off the month really trying with these romance books. I was like, okay, it's the month of love, like let me read some cute romances. But this guy was doing shit where I was like, if a guy did this to me in real life, or if he was perceiving me in this way, I would be creeped the fuck out. For example, he was like obsessed with this girl. He genuinely believed they were going to be together, even though she gave him no signs that she was interested. She was engaged to another person. They end up getting married in Vegas randomly, and he's like, yes, like finally have my hands on her, kind of like that's what it was giving me. And it might have come across a completely different way to someone who maybe doesn't have like trauma related to like obsessive people. I have a history with people who are fucking weird and obsessive, so I did have to DNF this. Then I moved on to a dark romance. So this was Lights Out, and I listened to this on audio. I was like, let me just give this a chance. I've seen it on TikTok. I didn't even listen to that much of it, and I wish I could get those precious minutes back because this was so fucking cringe. It was painful. The main female character in this is weirdly obsessed with this guy on TikTok, and she leaves like the cringiest, most desperate comments, like how she wants to like lick his abs. I hate reading about characters where the girl is like desperate for the guy. I'm like, girl, you're the queen here. Why are you being desperate to these fucking average guys? He then like breaks into her house and stalks her.
What happened to hello? How are you?
I just felt so uncomfortable like listening to this guy who's trying to come across as sexy. I just genuinely felt so embarrassed, and I was praying to God that no one could hear through my window or my neighbors couldn't hear what I was listening to because it was so embarrassing. I had to DNF this shit. Then I was like, okay, let me give this book a chance. This is the 4th book in the ACOTAR series. It's the shortest book. It's like a novella. I read about 100 pages of this, and I was so fucking bored. Literally nothing was happening. It was just so pointless. And I understand some people say like this is a good palate cleanser, it's a breather in between like the craziness of the books, but I'm like, girl, just give me the next book, give me the drama, give me the craziness. Then I read Pretty Girls, which is a thriller that everyone loves. I sadly had to DNF this. I was so unbelievably bored, so slow paced. It just felt never ending, and I get a lot of people were saying like this is so dark, it reels you in, and it's definitely dark. There's definitely dark themes, but I was forcing myself to pick this up, and I just did not care enough to keep going. Also, Flawless. This is part of the Elsie Silver universe, which is like these cowboy romances. This was like an enemies to lovers type situation. It was hard to get through. Like the male main character, he was such a douchebag. He was so cocky, so annoying. You're reading about how they like hate each other, but then like they slowly start realizing they're like attracted to each other. And I was like, girl, this is so like annoying to read. Then I read Every Last Secret by A.R. Torrey, and this is one of those bitch I'm gonna steal your life books where someone tries to steal the life of someone that's way richer and more successful than them and basically take their place. I've just read 2 books in the past month that is exactly the same vibe as this, that I was just over it. I didn't care about any of the characters. I feel like I've read this trope so many times, so I did DNF this. I also read another thriller, which was The Best of Friends by Lucinda Berry. Did not connect with the characters. It was about 3 boys. They accidentally end up shooting each other, and you're trying to find out what really happened. It's told through the point of view of the parents. DNF this. Moving on to my 2-star books. First we have The Housemaid. This is again one of those books where it's been done. There's a lot of controversy surrounding this author. She copies other people's books. She copies the concepts down to the details. I read this book in another format last month and loved that book, and that was the original blueprint. This is the last Frida book I will be reading. I did enjoy this in the sense of it was fast-paced. I finished it in a day, but in the end I was like, girl, really, that's it? Then I read Razorblade Tears, which I had really high expectations for because everyone seems to love this, but this was so slow. This is not a thriller to me. This put me to sleep. I was so bored. I was constantly forcing myself to pick this up. I was waiting for something to happen, and yes, there was like action scenes and fighting scenes. If you like Quentin Tarantino type movies, you would like this, but it was just like machete scene going on this like goose chase to find this like person to hopefully give them answers, and I was like, I don't want to waste my time like reading about them tracking someone down to get answers. Like, I need more. It's so underwhelming, and also it was just super male-centric. It just feels like this is for the male gaze. Was not connecting with this. Yeah, I had to get off this at around 200 pages. And then I read this romance, which is Archer's Voice. Started off really good. This started off good. It's basically about this guy who's mute because he went through a lot of trauma which affected his voice box. He's basically viewed as like the outcast of the town. This girl moves into town and she can speak sign language, so she like connects with him and they have this like special connection, and it was really cute at first. I love like rooting for the underdog. He just seemed really sweet. And then we get to the third act breakup. I know it happens in every book, but this one just pissed me off so much. It just was defying logic. He basically gets manipulated to do something that hurts their relationship. They almost make him seem childlike, to where you're like, oh, it's not his fault. He doesn't understand like what a relationship's supposed to be like and what monogamy is like. And I'm like, girl, what?
I can even see through the window.
This is a grown-ass man and you're telling me he doesn't know what loyalty is? Like, are you fucking kidding me? It literally just went downhill from there. Then we have the third book in the Zodiac Academy series. Oh my god, I just felt like we were going in circles with these characters. Like, can we just focus on the actual plot? Like, the life or death kind of stakes that we have here. If it continues pissing me off the way it did, then I will DNF this series, because there was points where I was like, girl, I don't know if I can do this. Now on to our 3 stars. I Who Have Never Known Men. This is a book about a group of women who are kept underground their entire life until one day they escape and they're free now and they can go out into the outside world. And this is where I might have misinterpreted what this story was going to be. I thought that they were escaping into maybe like the modern world and try to like integrate into society and learn what it is to be a human, but this is like this weird post-apocalyptic world. There's just nothing there. The majority of the book is just survival, just roaming around. Gave no answers as to why they were there in the first place. It wasn't really what I was expecting. Then we have The Mirror. This is a random book I picked up at the thrift store. I love picking up books at the thrift store. It's so fun finding like a book I've never heard about. The concept really drew me in. This is about a woman who gets transported into the body of her grandma, and she realizes that she is now living the life as her grandma as a 20-year-old, and she has to do everything that her grandma ended up doing, such as like sleeping with her grandpa, having a baby which will turn out to be her mom then having her in the future. Basically takes the place as her grandma, while her grandma gets transported into her body. Her grandma, who grew up in the 1900s, is now transported into like a more modern day society, and she's like dealing with culture shock. This book was written in a very like old style of writing, so it definitely takes brain power. I was pushing to get through this book. Once we got to the grandma's point of view, I was just bored. I just wanted this to be over, to be honest, and it was taking so much brain power to read this. Then I wanted to read a romance book by Nicholas Sparks, because I've really struggled with like the contemporary romances that are out nowadays, like the cartoon type character covers. I hate those kind of romances. I just think they're so cliche. So I wanted to give a chance to older romance books because I feel like maybe they would be more deep, more emotional. So I read The Wish by Nicholas Sparks. I actually listened to this on YouTube. It wasn't really as heart-wrenching as I wanted it to be honest. I think I wanted like to cry. I wanted to feel something. And the content was sad. Like, you're listening to the story about this woman who has cancer, and she's reflecting back on the love story she had when she was a teenager, and you're figuring out what happened between them and then how she ended up where she is. It was just an okay book for me. Sorry, before we get into 4 stars, I have to talk about one more 1 star I forgot to mention, which is A Man Called Ove, and this pissed me off so much. This is about an old man who's really grumpy, and you're expecting him to like have this change of heart. The things that this man was doing were so diabolical. First of all, this man is sexist, he's racist, he was making comments about women and how like women are bad drivers, talking about like foreigners in a negative light. He also abuses animals, he kicks cats for no reason. Just found it really hard to get through. Like, it was just making me hate him, and I don't want to read a book about someone I actively hate. The way that he thinks creeped and pissed me off. For example, you're learning about his love story with his wife back in the day. The way that he met her was he saw her at the train station and decided to get on the train and follow her. Proceed to go the wrong way for hours on this train so that he could have a chance to stare at her and talk to her. He does this every day for months. He eventually talks to her and tells her like, oh, no, I have a job and I have to go the same way as you. And that is just so creepy to me. Like, if I found out that a guy was pretending to have a job so that he could sit next to B. That would creep me out. I'm sorry, that's not romantic, that's scary. He eventually tells her like, yeah, sorry, I lied about all of that, and she's like, oh, it's fine. What? Is that not a red flag? I don't think I'm gonna be continuing to read Frederick Bachman's books. I just don't think his books are for me. Okay, but getting into the 4 stars, we have Everything I Know About Love. I annotated this and I enjoyed this. This is a coming of age story about this girl who is chronically the single friend, and I related so hard to this because I am that single friend, and the single friend is the person in the friend group who 80 to 90% of the time they are single. Talks about what it's like to be that friend and see your friends get into relationships and slowly have them disappear from your life because, you know, they are wrapped up in their relationship, and that's just what happens sometimes. It also talks about heartbreak and partying and just being a girl. I love how the central theme was like loving your female friendships. I definitely enjoyed this. Then we have the first 2 books of the Zodiac Academy series. This was one of those books where I was like, let me just give this a chance. It's about these 2 girls, these twins, who find out that they are princesses of this magical world where literally every creature exists, like vampires, werewolves, dragons, as well as the elemental powers, so like fire, earth, air, water. They basically go to the school that kind of gives like Harry Potter, where everyone has special powers and everyone's trying to learn how to control it. They take all these magical classes, but they're also up against these 4 princes or heirs. They're all like hot but they're also douchebags at times because they're scared that the girls are gonna take their place like as royalty. And what really drew me into this book was one of the twins. Both of them are pretty badass, but one of them is especially like a badass strong female main character. She starts off the book literally stealing motorcycles, basically being a criminal, and I loved it. I will say there are things that piss me off about this book, but I do feel like this is a guilty pleasure for me. I do still really enjoy reading about the romance, and the storyline is really interesting as well. We'll see if it continues to piss me off though. Then we have Appetite for Innocence by Lucinda Berry, and this is a kidnapping thriller. Kidnapping thrillers are surprisingly like my favorite type of thrillers to read about. This is about this kidnapper who targets young girls who are still virgins. Basically, he likes them because they are innocent in his eyes. So you're following these girls that are kept in this basement and following them trying to break out, what happens afterwards. It was really interesting, really dark though, I will say. Definitely could be extremely triggering. I was definitely struggling at times reading this book. There was some graphic dark scenes, but I also like that Lucinda Berry isn't afraid to go there because it is so raw, so real. You feel so hard for these characters. I also liked how the kidnapper is different than what you would expect. This guy was giving like American Psycho Patrick Bateman in a sense, where like he comes across to the world as this like guy who's like attractive, he wears suits, he's really successful. I like that was kind of different. Really messed up, but I enjoyed this. Then we have All About Love by Bell Hooks, and this I really enjoyed. As it says, it's all about love, basically, different types of love, like family love, romantic love, friendship, the importance of opening our hearts up to love, and why love manifests in our society the way that it does, what things are normalized for females to do versus males, and why relationships between men and women can have a lot of difficulties based on society's socialization of people. I will say I was kind of bored during certain parts, but I think this was a really insightful read, and I do recommend people to read this. And now on to my 5-star reads. So first we have Still Missing, which is a kidnapping thriller. Surprise. This was so good. This is the first thriller that's ever made me genuinely cry reading it because of how much pain I was feeling for the main character. She basically gets kidnapped by this fucking psychopath. He builds this whole house that's designed to keep her kidnapped. No windows, like it's completely made of metal inside, like she cannot escape, and you're following her life while she's being mentally and physically tortured by this person. She has to fake being in love with him so that he doesn't kill her, and it's so heartbreaking to read. The things that he does too to like keep her manipulated was so enraging to read about. Like I was so pissed off reading this book. I wanted to go through this book and beat the shit out of this guy, but you're also following a different timeline after she's escaped, so you know she's escaped, but you're trying to figure out why he kidnapped her. I was literally getting my nails done reading this book and I was crying at the nail salon. It ripped my heart out, and yeah, I would recommend anyone who loves thrillers to read this. Then we have my favorite memoir of all time, which is Julia Fox's Down the Drain. This is like the most unhinged woman book ever. You're following her drug addiction, her being a dominatrix, running away from home and being tracked down by the police, her crazy toxic relationships. It's so entertaining, so real, so raw, so inspiring to read, and I love how you see the progression of her life, like coming from the really toxic situation and making a name for herself and being this amazing woman that she is now. Then we also have my favorite book of all time now, and this was Circe. This was so good. I randomly saw this at the library. This is definitely also giving unhinged woman. It's also giving hurt woman. This definitely will connect to the women who have been through trauma and have been treated like shit, especially by men in their life. You're following the Greek goddess of Circe, and she's basically banished and exiled. Her dad doesn't want her part of the kingdom anymore. She's just too reckless for them. So she goes to this island and she's like spending time with herself, discovering her own powers, and then these sailors start to stop at her island and are like, hey, can you like give us food? We're really hungry. And she's like, yes, of course. Like, she's just really naive and really giving. She takes care of these soldiers, and then they take advantage of her and do really messed up things. And from that point on, there's like a flip that happens in her, and she's like, wow, I took care of these people and they're gonna do this shit to me. She gets her revenge on them, and she starts being this badass woman, unhinged woman. But then you're also following her story, falling in love, discovering herself, going on adventures. I honestly think every woman should read this. The writing was so beautiful as well. I couldn't underline it because I was borrowing it from the library, so I was taking so many pictures on my phone and putting it into an album full of quotes from this book. Like, they were so beautiful. Lastly, we have Dark Matter. This is a sci-fi thriller. The word sci-fi kind of scares me sometimes because I'm like, girl, I don't like science. I don't like all of that stuff. But this was basically more about like time travel and parallel universes, of how like every choice that you make has a different effect, and there's many different versions of you out there depending on the different choices that you've made. About this guy who finds out that there's many different versions of himself in all these parallel universes. It's basically like the multiverse. He transports into these different universes, and he's going through all these worlds and seeing all these different versions of himself and what could have happened depending on different life choices that he made, or depending on the world and like what has happened in that world, trying to find his way back home. And there's some really sinister things going on as to why he ended up in that situation. So fascinating to read. It's so fast paced. I was racing to get to the end. It really makes you question yourself and every choice that you've made. How different could my life be if I didn't do that, or if I did do that? But that is it for all the books that I read in February. Let me know what your favorite books were this month. I'm always adding to my TBR. If you could please subscribe, like this video, comment, I'd really appreciate that. But I will see you hopefully in my next video.